The Loomis Hotel charity gala for the Children's Hospital had been arranged for 900 people, and 900 people had agreed to behave as if the only person who mattered was whoever was speaking. At table 7, near the inside curve of the dance floor, a deaf 9-year-old sat alone with her hands folded in her lap and watched the room behave. Her name was Lily Rourke. She was 9 years old. She wore a midnight blue dress that her uncle's housekeeper had ironed at 4 that afternoon, and her hair had been pinned with a single mother-of-pearl comb that had belonged to her mother. In the small, beaded clutch on her lap, she carried 2 things that mattered to her: a piece of meteorite the size of a fingernail wrapped in tissue, and a folded slip of paper on which she had written, in case anyone asked, the words, "I am death. I read your mouth a little. I sign." She had not yet had to give the paper to anyone, because no one had asked. Around her, the cocktail hour was at its loudest. Waiters threaded between the tables with trays of champagne and small pastries that smelled of brown butter and salt. The chandelier light caught on the rims of the glasses and on the long sweep of the senator's wife's earrings 2 tables over. A string quartet on the low stage was playing something slow underneath the conversation, the way music plays when no one is listening to it on purpose. 3 women had already passed without speaking. The gala chair paused beside her chair, waved to someone across the room, and walked on without looking down. A hospital board member had glanced at her name card with the small, pleased smile of a person remembering a name, then said brightly to her companion, "And you must come for cocktails on the terrace," and continued past. A photographer had crouched at the table for a wide shot of the centerpiece, angling the lens so that Lily was a soft, deliberately blurred shoulder at the edge of the frame. Lily had watched all 3. She had watched her Uncle Daniel leave too. He had walked her to her chair, set his palm briefly on the top of her head, and signed, "2 minutes, all right? I have to speak with Andrew." 2 minutes was an hour and 20 so far. She had counted by looking at the clock above the orchestra. He would come back. He always came back. He was very good at coming back. He was less good at sitting down once he did. The empty chair beside her had his place card on it. Daniel Rourke, table 7. The chair on her other side had no place card at all. Someone, at some earlier hour, had removed it. Across the room she could see Aubrey, the only other person at the gala her age, and who could sign. Aubrey was at table 11 with her parents and grandmother, and a woman from the Children's Hospital named Dr. Hahn. They were too far to talk to. Once, when she had caught Aubrey's eye, they had made a small, signed exchange across the cocktail crowd. "Meteor question," Aubrey had asked, the sign sketched fast and silly above her water glass, and Lily had answered, "What kind?" And Aubrey's mother had touched her daughter's hand gently and turned her back, because the senator was about to be introduced. So Lily watched the room. She was used to watching rooms. She kept her hands folded in her lap so that she did not look as if she was waiting for someone to come back, even though she was. She was watching the chandelier when the woman in the navy dress reached her table. The woman had not approached the way the others had. She had not paused beside the chair. She had not lifted her hand to wave at anyone. She had walked over with the quick, unhurried walk of a person on a corridor between 2 other places, and she had stopped a half step back from the chair so that she did not loom. And then she had crouched. Not bent forward, not leaned in. She had crouched all the way down so that her face was level with Lily's, with one knee on the carpeted floor and the other folded under her, and the long fall of her navy dress arranged out of her own way without fuss. She did not introduce herself first. She lifted her hands and signed, "Hello, may I sit for a moment?" Her signs were careful and a little slow, the way a doctor speaks to an awake patient. She had not made the small mistake adults made when they wanted to be approved of, which was to compliment Lily's dress before saying anything else. Lily looked at her. The woman was perhaps 30. Her hair was the dark, warm brown of varnished wood, pinned up with 2 plain pins, with one strand loose at the right side of her face. She wore the navy dress, simple, no jewelry beyond a thin gold chain at her throat. Her shoes were not quite the shoes of the rest of the room, a low heel, scuffed at the back. She wore a small badge clipped, partially hidden, to the inside of the dress's bodice, the kind of badge hospital staff wear when they have come straight from a shift and forgotten to take it off. Lily signed, "Yes." The woman sat, not all the way down. She took the empty chair on Lily's other side, the one without a place card, and turned it slightly so that they were facing each other rather than the room. The angle was small and exact. It cut off Lily's view of the photographer and the chair where the Gala chair would stop again on her next pass, and it cut off any easy line of sight from the room into the conversation, and it placed the woman as a kind of soft wall between Lily and the noise. She signed, "I am Sloane. May I ask you your name?" "Lily." "Lily, hello." A pause. The woman waited, not to fill the pause, the way the photographer would have done. Just waited. Then she signed, "Are you here with someone tonight?" "My uncle. He is in another room." "Would he come back?" "Yes." A flicker of something at the edge of the woman's mouth. Not a smile. Acceptance of the answer. She signed, "Has anyone offered you anything to eat?" "No." The flicker became a tilt of the head. "I have grapes," the woman signed, "in my clutch. Would you like some? They are small and green, and the kind without seeds." Lily considered this. The waiters had passed her 4 times. None of the trays they had carried had been low enough for her to reach, and none of them had paused. She signed, "Yes, please." The woman, Sloane, opened a small dark clutch on her lap and took out a folded square of brown paper and unfolded it into a little flat packet with the grapes inside. She set the packet on the white tablecloth between them. She did not take any first. She nodded at it once and signed, "Yours." Lily lifted one grape and put it in her mouth. Sloane watched the room for a moment, lightly, the way a person watches traffic before crossing. Then she turned back and signed, "I work at Lincoln Memorial. I am a doctor. Children's heart things. I learned signing because there are children in my unit who sign, and I wanted to talk to them. So my signing is not perfect. Will you correct me?" She did not say, "I learned a little sign language to help children like you." She did not say, "Your courage inspires me." She did not say, "You are so brave." She said, "Will you correct me?" Lily, who knew the difference between the 2 kinds of adults, signed, "Yes." She added, after a beat, because it felt fair, "Your signing is fine." "It is medical fine," Sloane signed back, "which means I can ask if you have eaten and how much water you have had today, and the names of all the major arteries, and almost nothing else. So tonight I'm going to learn 3 new words. From me, if you will teach me." Lily looked at her. There was a slow, warm feeling beginning low in her chest. It was not the feeling of being rescued. It was the feeling of being met. She had felt it before, with Aubrey, with Aubrey's mother, with her own mother when her mother had been alive, with one teacher at the Kinsey Park day school, with Mrs. Pham, who managed her uncle's house. She had not felt it tonight. She had not really expected to. The room had told her, all evening, what kind of room it was. She signed, "All right. The first word is meteor." Sloane laughed, silently, with her shoulders. She signed, "Meteor." Her fingers were not quite right. Lily corrected the angle. Sloane copied. Lily nodded. Sloane signed, "Meteor" again, cleanly, as if making it permanent. Above them, the senator was being introduced. The room rose to its feet in a slow, rolling wave. Sloane, still seated in the chair without a place card, looked at Lily's eyes and lifted her hands an inch from her lap and signed very small, "We can stay sitting. Will you tell me, while they clap, what the second word is?" The room clapped. Lily, watching her, signed, "Sister." Sloane went still for the smallest fraction of a second, the kind of still that a child notices and an adult misses. Then she signed, slow and exact, "Sister." She did not ask whose. She did not ask why that word. She held the sign in the air a beat longer than she needed to, like a person tasting a word in a new language, and then she lowered her hands. She signed, and the third? Lily had not picked the third yet, she thought. The room finished clapping. The senator began to speak. Lily watched the woman's careful, unjeweled hands resting on her lap, and the loose strand of hair at the right side of her face, and she signed, slowly. I will tell you the third, later, after the program. All right, Sloane signed back. She did not move. She stayed in the chair with no name card on it through the entire opening speech. And at one point she reached, without looking, for a glass of ice water from the table, and she set it down at Lily's elbow, within Lily's reach. She did not announce that she had done it. She did not check whether Lily had noticed. She turned a little, so that her shoulder was again the soft wall between the table and the room, and she folded her hands in her lap, and she waited for the speech to end, the way a person waits beside a friend at a bus stop. It was at this moment, from the far doorway, that a man stopped. He had come back into the ballroom from the corridor that led to the smaller meeting rooms. His tie was straight. His jacket was buttoned. He was carrying nothing. No glass, no folder, no phone, which in this room, and at this hour, was unusual. He had paused inside the doorway to scan for table 7, the way a man checks a parking spot from a distance, and he had found it, and he had not moved. He saw from across the floor the navy-dressed shoulder of the woman bent toward his niece. He saw the small packet of grapes on the white tablecloth between them. He saw the careful angle of the chair without a place card, turned to make a wall against the room. He saw the unjeweled, careful hand reach for the ice water and place it within reach. He saw, although he could not hear them, 2 pairs of hands shaping words in the air. He did not, for a long moment, walk forward. He stood inside the doorway with his hand at his left wrist, his thumb pressed against the small gold cufflink there, and he watched a stranger do for his niece what he himself had failed to do in 900 days. His name was Daniel Rourke. He was 35. He ran the holding company that owned 11% of the Loomis Hotel and the option on the South Loop building that would become Lincoln Memorial's new pediatric cardiology wing. He had paid, personally, for table 7, and every glass of champagne carried past his niece without being lowered for her. He had become her guardian 2.5 years before, in a lawyer's office, with the same steady voice with which he agreed to all things. He had not, since then, agreed once to himself that this was what he had become. Not a man with a niece, a father. He had agreed, instead, to operational improvements. Lily's school, healthcare, after-school activities had been carefully selected. The housekeeper, Iris Pham, who had loved Lily's mother since she was 12, had been retained at a salary that did not insult her. A second car had been added, so Henry, the driver, could deliver Lily to school without crossing Daniel's mornings. The chair on Lily's other side had not been carefully selected, because Daniel had not believed Lily would have anyone to sit with. The empty chair had been removed during cocktails by a floor staffer told to set the table for 9. His hand on his cufflink did not move. He was, he understood, looking at a woman who had located that missing chair somewhere on the ballroom floor and dragged it back to the place where the staff had decided his niece did not need company. He was looking at a woman who had crouched first. The senator finished his sentence. The room laughed politely. Daniel did not laugh. He understood, with the clean, cold clarity in which he understood balance sheets, that he had spent 2.5 years arranging his sister's daughter's life into a careful row of correctly chosen folders, and that not one of those folders contained an answer to the question of who would sit on her other side at her first formal dinner. He understood, also, that the only person in the room who had answered that question was a stranger in a navy dress with a hospital badge clipped to the inside of her bodice, and a single loose strand of brown hair at the right side of her face. He walked, finally, forward. He moved through the cocktail crowd the way a tall man with money in this city moves through a crowd, without effort, because the crowd moved a little before he reached it. People who saw him coming stepped aside, as if remembering a kindness he had once done them. A donor he had spoken to 2 weeks before lifted his glass at him, and Daniel inclined his head, did not stop. He was perhaps 15 feet from his own table when the Gala chair, Vivian Ashworth Pell, intercepted him with the practiced lightness of a woman who had been intercepting him politely for 6 years. "Daniel." She set her gloved hand on his forearm. She wore champagne silk and a brooch at her collarbone that had belonged to her mother, and she was smiling the small, social smile that did not change the shape of her eyes. "Truthfully, I was about to send Andrew to look for you. The senator wants a word before he sits down. 5 minutes, less. I told him I could find you in 3. He did not stop walking, but he slowed. "After dinner." "He flies out at 10. "After dinner. I have to." He nodded, very slightly, past her shoulder toward table 7. She looked. She had not, until that nod, looked at table 7 all evening. Her gaze had moved past it 3 times. She looked now, and she saw the navy dress, and she saw the chair that should not have been there, and her small, social smile flickered for the smallest possible fraction of a second, in a way that Daniel, who had spent 6 years watching her face for very small fractions of seconds, registered the way an instrument registers a tremor. "Of course," Vivian said. "Of course. After dinner." He passed her. He reached table 7. He set his hand briefly, the way he always set his hand briefly, on the top of Lily's head, and Lily, without turning, lifted her right hand and pressed it once, lightly, against his, and lowered it again. The packet of grapes was still open between her and the woman in the navy dress. The ice water was at her elbow. The chair on her other side was occupied. The woman in the navy dress looked up. She looked up at him, calmly, with the steady eyes of a person who had been on her feet for 11 hours before this, and she nodded once. She did not introduce herself first. She did not stand. She did not, in the small, ceremonial way of this room, rise for the man whose name was on the donor wall in the lobby. She simply nodded, as a colleague nods to a colleague at a hospital station. "You are her uncle," she said. Her voice, spoken aloud, was lower than he had imagined a woman who signed at Children's Heights would sound. "I am," he said. A beat. "Daniel." "Sloan," she said. "Marchetti, from Lincoln Memorial." "You're a staff." "I'm a pediatrician. I'm on the cardiology side. I came tonight because 3 of my patients' families are here." "I see." "Your niece," Sloan said, "and I have an arrangement. She is teaching me 3 signs. She's taught me 1. The second is coming after the senator finishes." "And the third?" "After the program." Daniel held her gaze for a moment that, had it been measured by any of the photographers in the room, would have been 4 full seconds, long enough on a ballroom floor to be a paragraph. He did not, in those 4 seconds, say any of the 11 sentences he had been forming as he walked across the room. He did not say thank you. He did not say you didn't have to. He did not say please stay. He did not, especially, say the line his lawyer would have wanted. "I appreciate it, doctor, but the family prefers to keep these moments private." He said, "May I sit?" It was not quite a question. Sloan looked at Lily. Lily looked at her uncle. She lifted her hands and signed, in his line of sight, "He can sit." The third sign is for him to know later. Sloan translated this for him with a small, precise tilt of her hand toward Lily and a small, precise nod, the way a person translates a private exchange faithfully without making the speakers feel observed. "She says you can sit. The third sign she's going to keep for after." He sat. He sat in his own chair, in his own jacket, at his own table, at the gala that he had bought 10 seats at, with his hand still resting at the curve of the cufflink on his left wrist, and he understood for the first time all evening that there were only 3 people in this ballroom whose presence he could, just now, actually feel. His niece, the stranger beside her, and his sister Cara, who had been gone for 2 years and 1 month, and who had, 12 years ago, taught him every sign he had ever known, and from whom, since her passing, he had not asked his niece for a single lesson. He pressed the cufflink. The senator finished his joke. The room laughed. Lily lifted a grape from the packet between them and held it out to her uncle on the flat of her palm. He took it. He did not eat it. He held it for a moment, looked at it, looked at her, and then placed it very gently back on the brown paper packet between them, and signed, slowly, with hands he had not used in a year, "I will save mine for after." Lily's mouth, for the first time all evening, lifted at the corner. Sloane, in the navy dress, in the chair that should not have been there, did not look at either of them. She watched the rim of the centerpiece. She kept her hands in her lap. She gave them the small distance two people sometimes need to be alone at a crowded table. And she waited. The string quartet began to play again under the conversation. Outside, in the corridor he had just come from, Andrew, Daniel's chief of staff, was holding a folder he had not yet opened, looking through the glass panel of the ballroom door at his employer's back, and wondering whether he should still deliver the rumor that a former pediatric cardiology fellow at Lincoln Memorial was about to go on record with a story about institutional negligence in the wing this gala was funding, and whether the woman in the navy dress at table 7 was the very fellow in question. Andrew was also wondering whether to call Vivian first or his employer first. He decided to wait. He stepped back from the glass. The door closed. Dinner was served, as always at the Loomis, at 7:30 exactly. Plates came in long covered runs from the service corridor, set down by waiters in a movement so practiced the conversation did not lift to accommodate it. The chair at Lily's other side stayed occupied. The packet of grapes had been folded back into its small brown square beside Sloane's clutch, untouched. The senator was at the head table, laughing at something a junior congresswoman had said, which meant Vivian's request for 5 minutes had become, by silent ballroom physics, a request for some time tomorrow. Daniel had not looked at his salad. He had eaten 4 bites of the fillet, taken half a glass of water, not touched the wine. He had used the time to ask, in pieces, the practical questions a guardian asks a doctor when the doctor has been better than him at being a parent. Where had she gone to medical school? Where her residency? How many languages of pediatric cardiology did Lincoln Memorial's wing currently practice? He did not ask, although he wanted to, where she had learned to sign at chair height first and ask later. He suspected the answer was not a course catalogue. Sloane answered in the order he asked. Northwestern, the University of Chicago. 3. 4 if you counted the slightly different working vocabulary of the cath lab versus the bedside. She did not ask him questions in return. She had clearly decided, somewhere between her crouch and his arrival, that the table was Lily's table, and that her job at it was not to interview the man who paid for the chairs. Between courses, while a chef Lily liked at the children's hospital was being honored on the small stage for a community recipe book, Sloane lifted her hand half an inch above the tablecloth and signed, to Lily alone, "Second word." Lily considered. The chef on the stage was a woman with a long grey braid who had once given Lily a tour of the hospital kitchen. The kitchen had been Lily's favourite room at the children's hospital, because it was the room that did not require anything from her except presence. Lily had been there with her mother once, before she lost her mother, on a tour Cara had arranged because Cara had believed in showing her daughter who actually made the world work. Lily signed, "Kitchen." Sloane signed it back, carefully. Lily corrected the placement of the thumb. Sloane corrected herself. The chef on the stage was finishing her remarks. The room would clap in 8 seconds. In the brief silence before the clapping, the gala chair, Vivian Ashworth Pell, set her napkin on the edge of the head table, pushed her chair back the small distance such pushing requires, walked the length of the floor at a polite, social pace, and arrived at table 7 exactly as the applause began. She did not crouch. She stood at the small, clear angle behind Sloane's chair, where the lighting from the chandelier above caught her champagne silk dress and her brooch favourably. And she said, in the lifted, bright voice the room used for asking favours, "I am sorry to interrupt. Dr. Marchetti, isn't it?" Sloane turned her head a degree. "Yes." "I wonder if I could borrow you for one moment. Some of our hospital colleagues at table 11 were just asking whether one of the on-call sign liaisons could step over and help Aubrey's grandmother understand the program for the auction. The grandmother is hard of hearing, and the auctioneer speaks rather fast. Vivian's smile was warm and well engineered. It would be such a kindness. There was a small silence at table 7. Sloane looked, for one steady beat, at Lily. She did not look at Daniel. She did not look at Vivian's mouth. She looked, deliberately, at the child she had been speaking with, and she lifted her hands above the tablecloth and signed, slowly enough for Lily to follow and for Vivienne above her to take it in as a foreign rustling sound. "Excuse me 1 moment. I will come back." Lily nodded. Sloane rose. She did it without flourish. She set her napkin onto the seat of the chair behind her instead of the table, the way a doctor sets a chart on a chair to indicate, "I am not finished here." And she turned, and she faced the Gala chair across the table line. "Mrs. Ashworth Pell," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Aubrey's grandmother is Dr. Hahn." A small pause. "I'm sorry." "Dr. Hahn," Sloane said. "May Hahn. She is a retired pediatrician. She trained at Northwestern with my chief of cardiology. She is fluent in Cantonese, English, and American Sign Language. She does not, to my knowledge, need help understanding any auctioneer in this city." Vivian's smile held, but the corners of her eyes adjusted by the smallest measurable degree. "I see. Well, I may have been misinformed. It happens. I wonder, though." Vivian lifted her own hand and rested it lightly on the back of Sloane's chair, which was now between them, and tilted her head with the practiced compassion of a woman who chaired 4 charities. "I wonder, while I have you. The hospital's staff are working tonight, of course, and your colleagues at table 11 would, I'm sure, prefer that the family side of the evening be left to the family. There is a green room set up off the lobby for any on-call staff who need to step away. If you'd be more comfortable—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Sloane looked at her. She did not move her hands. She did not raise her voice. She said evenly, "I am not on call tonight. I came as a guest, on an invitation extended to 3 pediatric attendings this month, of whom I am one. My original table was 14. I am at table 7 because the child here was alone, and I came to sit with her, and her uncle asked me to stay. With respect, the family side of this table is taken up by an empty chair someone removed earlier, and that I located by the freight elevator. I would prefer to keep it." Daniel, beside Lily, did not move. His hand was at his cufflink again. He did not look at Vivian. He looked evenly at Sloane. Vivian breathed in, briefly, and then out. The smile, which had been doing the work of holding the conversation in shape, slipped a fraction. "Of course," she said. "Of course. I am sure we can." "Vivian," Daniel spoke for the first time. He spoke the Gala chair's first name, the way a long colleague speaks a first name when he intends a sentence to be heard as private, even in a room of 900 people. "Thank you. I'd like Dr. Marchetti to remain at this table for the rest of the program. Please convey my apologies to the senator. He and I can speak in the morning." The smile recovered. "Daniel, of course." She did not leave immediately. She paused, a heartbeat, and then she lifted her free hand and set it briefly on Lily's shoulder, the first adult hand other than Daniel's and Sloane's that had touched Lily all evening. And she said, brightly, "And how is our young lady enjoying her first Gala?" Lily looked up at her. She did not answer. She did not, in fact, even attempt to read Vivian's mouth, which would have required tilting her head at an angle that the chair did not naturally permit. She looked up, evenly, with the dark eyes she had inherited from her mother, and she waited. Vivian's smile became, for a second, a fixed thing. Sloane lifted her hand from her lap, slowly, and signed at table level, where Vivian could see the shape but not pass it. "You may answer or not answer. Your choice." Lily signed back. "Not." Sloane translated for the table aloud, with the same precise tilt of her hand toward Lily she had used earlier. She prefers not to answer that one tonight. She is saving her words. It was, in its small way, the cleanest exit Vivian had been offered all evening. She took it. She tilted her chin in a polite acknowledgement, withdrew her hand from Lily's shoulder, and walked back to the head table with the same unhurried, social pace. The senator's wife laughed at something across the room as Vivian sat down. The orchestra began the small fanfare for the auction. Sloane sat down again. She picked up her napkin from the chair seat behind her and laid it back across her lap. She did not look at Daniel. Daniel, beside Lily, was looking at Sloane. He said low, "Doctor?" "Doctor," she said back, not a question, an answering. He said, "Sloane?" She turned her head a degree. He said, "Thank you." She held his look for one steady beat. Then she signed, small, for Lily. "He says thank you." Lily signed back, I heard. Sloane smiled, faintly, with her shoulders again, and turned back to her plate. The orchestra began the auction music in earnest. The room rose to its second wave of applause of the night. Sloane lifted a grape from the brown paper packet between her and Lily, and ate it at last. Daniel pressed his thumb against his cufflink very lightly, and let it go. He did not, for the rest of the dinner, leave his chair. The auction ran 40 minutes. Wine country, a private dinner, a small portrait commission Vivian won with the same small, bright smile she had worn earlier. The funds, the auctioneer announced, would go to the new Pediatric Cardiology Research Wing. When the auction ended, the orchestra struck up the first dance music, and the floor began, in slow, rolling movement, to clear of chairs and fill with shoes. Daniel waited for the second song to start, and then he leaned a half-inch to his right, into the line of his niece's vision, and signed, "Library?" Lily looked up at him. "Yes," she signed. He looked across her at Sloane. He did not sign for Sloane's benefit, because she had already understood. He said, aloud, "There is a private library off the mezzanine that the hotel keeps for board members. It is quieter. May I impose on you to come up with us for an hour?" Sloane considered this for one beat. She said, "All right." She did not say yes. Daniel rose. He held out his hand to Lily. Lily took it. Sloane gathered her clutch and the folded packet of grapes, and the three of them left table 7 and walked out along the inside curve of the room, not pausing for any of the people who looked up. Vivian, at the head table, watched them go. Andrew, near the kitchen pass with the still unopened folder under his arm, watched also. He glanced at his employer's profile as it passed, and lifted his hand slightly. The cue for, "Now is a good time to speak." Daniel did not see it. Or he saw it and did not stop. Andrew lowered his hand. The mezzanine library at the Loomis was a small, dark room with a green carpet that swallowed sound. 2 leather sofas at a right angle around a low, brass-fitted table. 3 walls of bookshelves, filled with the kind of books a hotel buys by the running foot. A window looking out across Michigan Avenue, and a single floor lamp with a green glass shade. The hotel kept the door propped open during galas as a courtesy, with a small velvet rope across the doorway to indicate that the room was reserved. A waiter unhooked the rope when Daniel approached, and replaced it after the 3 of them had gone in. The lamp was on. The hotel had also, at some hour before the evening began, placed a silver tray on the brass-fitted table with 3 glasses, a carafe of water, a small plate of plain butter cookies, and a folded white napkin. Daniel, who had not eaten any cookies at any function in 3 years, looked at the tray with mild surprise, and registered, briefly, that the hotel had thought to set it for 3. He showed Lily to the sofa nearest the window. She climbed onto it and pulled her knees up to her chest, which she did at home and had not been able to do all evening. Daniel took off his jacket, folded it once, and laid it over her lap, because she was cold. He sat at the other end of the sofa. Sloane took the other sofa, at the right angle. The lamp threw a green-gold light across all 3 of them, and made the room feel, briefly, like a room out of a story Lily had once read. About a girl allowed, after a long, polite evening, to sit in a corner with a piece of cake and a book. For a while, none of them said anything. Then Lily lifted her hands. She signed, "I've decided on the third word." Daniel turns to her. "Yes." She looked between the two of them. She signed, slow and exact, the way she had been taught at school to give a gift in front of more than one person. "The third word is meteor." Sloane laughed, silently, with her shoulders. "That was the first word," she signed. "Yes," Lily signed. "And it is also the third, because it should be the first word my uncle learns from you, and the last word you learn from me tonight. So tonight the word goes around in a circle." Daniel went very still. He had not, for 2.5 years, allowed himself to be addressed by Kara's daughter in this register. The register was Kara's. It was the register Kara had used when she was 9, when she had been the older sister, explaining to him, slowly, why the rule he had just made up was a foolish rule. He had absorbed this register since he was 5. He had not, since the morning he had identified his sister's body on a stretcher in a hospital corridor with a clipboard pressed to his chest, allowed any signed sentence at all to touch the place where that register lived. He held Lily's gaze. He lifted his hands, slow, and signed, "Will you teach me, then?" Lily looked at Sloane. "Show him." Sloane signed, "Meteor." Daniel watched her hands. His own had not moved. Lily signed, "He used to know. He has forgotten." Sloane held her hand still and did not turn her head and said, gently, in a voice low enough that the green-gold light seemed to absorb most of it, "I will be quiet for a minute." She lifted her water glass from the silver tray and crossed to the window. She looked out at the lights of Michigan Avenue and the slow ribbon of cars under a rain that had started without anyone in the ballroom noticing. She was thinking that the room behind her contained, at the low brass-fitted table, 2 people who had not, for 2.5 years, looked at each other in private without something practical between them. She had recognized the family at the door. She would have recognized it from across a parking lot. She had recognized her own father in it. Behind her, Daniel signed Meteor. Lily corrected the angle. He signed Meteor again, cleanly. Lily signed, "Good. Now in a sentence. The sentence is, 'I asked a meteor question.'" He signed it. The signs for I, ask, meteor, question, in the order Kara had taught him when he was 9 and she had been 13, and they had been sitting on the linoleum floor of their father's hardware store in West Loop, on a Sunday in winter, building a tower of paint cans, because their father not yet finished closing the till. He stopped. Lily, who knew without being told what had just happened in her uncle's chest, lowered her hands. She climbed across the sofa, slow, careful with his jacket on her lap, until she was beside him. She set the side of her face against the lapel of his shirt. She did not look at his eyes. She let him have his eyes. Daniel, in the green-gold light of the lamp, with his sister's daughter against his chest, and a stranger at the window with her back politely turned, allowed himself, for the first time in 2 years and 1 month, to stop pressing his thumb against his cufflink, and to set his other hand, instead, on the top of his niece's head, and to keep it there. Outside the window, the rain went on. At the window, glass cool in her hand, Sloane Marchetti drew a careful breath. She thought of her father, a deaf welder, fluent and big-handed and quiet, who had been lost at his shop on a January afternoon when she was 17. The last sign she had read off his hands was, "Go." He had been pointing at her medical school acceptance letter on the kitchen counter. She had gone. She had not, since, allowed herself to be invisible in any room she could afford to be visible in. Tonight she had been very nearly invisible by accident, and she had decided early in the evening to refuse it. She turned, after another moment, from the window. Lily was asleep against her uncle's chest. Daniel was looking down at her hair. He looked up when Sloane moved. He did not say thank you again. He had said it once, and he was not a man who repeated a sentence he had meant. He signed, instead. Slow, the way a man signs who has not signed in years. One word. The sign was kitchen. It was Lily's second word. Sloane, at the window, smiled. She came back to the silver tray. She sat down on the other sofa. She set her water glass on the brass-fitted table. She lifted, very lightly, the small folded napkin from the silver tray and laid it across her lap. She picked up one of the plain butter cookies and broke it in half and set the larger piece on the side of the tray nearest Daniel. She did not say anything. He took the cookie. He ate it. For 38 minutes, the three of them stayed. Henry Bow, who had been Daniel's driver for 9 years and who had driven Lily home from school on the rainy days Daniel could not, was waiting at the back of the loading bay corridor with the sedan running and a bag of plain pretzels on the dashboard for Lily, when Andrew finally caught up with his employer at the foot of the mezzanine stairs. Daniel, after the car leaves. It is the car I am here about. Daniel did not stop walking. He carried Lily in the easy, two-armed hold of a tall man whose niece had fallen asleep on his shoulder in a leather sofa for 38 minutes. Sloane walked at his right, Lily's small clutch held carefully in her own hand to keep the meteorite from rattling against the beads. Andrew, dropping into step at Daniel's left, kept his voice low. "There is a piece coming," Andrew said. "Marisol Espinosa is writing a profile of the Gala for the Sunday section, and her angle has shifted. She no longer wants to write about the senator. She wants to write about you, and your niece, and the wing. The angle she's pitching to her editor is, I want to say it gently. Say it however it lands. The angle is, can a man like Daniel Rourke be a father? That is not the line she will print. That is the question her piece is shaped to ask. Of course. She is downstairs in the small lounge by the coat check. She has been holding a glass of seltzer for an hour. She would like 5 minutes. She has asked Vivian for the introduction. Vivian has agreed in principle. Daniel slowed at the head of the stairs. And the second matter, Andrew said, reaching the part he had been rehearsing all evening. A separate story, independent of the profile. A former pediatric cardiology fellow at Lincoln Memorial filed an internal letter last winter on the wing's communication protocols for deaf patients. 12 pages. No individuals named. Structural recommendations. The hospital adopted 4 and tabled the rest. Never made public. Tonight, one of Marisol's research assistants asked our office for comment. We declined. The assistant asked, specifically, for a reaction quote from the Rourke Holdings co-naming party. And the fellow is? Andrew said the name. Daniel did not turn his head. He had reached the stairs, and Sloane was a half-step behind him, and the name Andrew had said was the name of the woman a half-step behind him. And he did not turn his head, because she had been a child's wall against a room for him for 2.5 hours, and he was not, just now, going to make her be a paragraph in a Sunday profile. Thank you, Andrew. Daniel, thank you, Andrew. Andrew, who had worked for Daniel long enough to recognize when the second thank you was a door closing, fell back to the foot of the stairs and stayed there. He watched the three of them go down. He registered, on the way, that Daniel had Lily on his shoulder, and that he had not seen Daniel carry Lily on his shoulder since the funeral, and that the carrying tonight was a different carrying. He registered this without filing it. At the coat check, the small lounge had 2 low armchairs and a glass of seltzer that had, by this hour, gone flat. Marisol Espinosa sat in the chair facing the door. She was 46, one of the city's better culture columnists for 19 years. She wrote the way a friend warns a friend about a man, precisely, kindly, and with a sentence at the end the friend would still be thinking about a week later. She looked up when Daniel arrived and did not stand. She looked at Lily on his shoulder and at Sloane behind him, and set her notebook face down on the table beside her. Mr. Rourke. Marisol. It is late. I'm not going to keep you. You are kind. She tipped her head toward Lily. Is she all right? She is asleep. Then I will ask you one question, Mr. Rourke. There are 6 private schools in this city that take deaf students full-time, and 1 mainstream day school with a competent inclusion program. Your niece attends the latter. The angle of my piece, as your chief of staff has explained, is whether a man like you can father a child like her. My personal opinion, after 2 galas and a private fundraiser, is that the answer is not yet settled. The small piece I am here to ask tonight is, who chose the day school? A beat. My niece, Daniel said. My niece chose it. At 7 years old. At 7 years old. After a tour. She told me, at the end of the tour, the school had 3 children in her year who already signed, and 1 teacher who signed, and the cafeteria smelled like the cafeteria at the children's hospital she had liked. She said to me, in the car on the way home, that one. I said, all right. She has been there ever since. Marisol wrote nothing. She did not pick up the notebook. She looked, for a long beat, at the woman behind Daniel. Dr. Marchetti, she said. Sloane lifted her chin. Ms. Espinosa. You don't need to comment. I have nothing to comment on. Then I have a separate question for you, off the record. It is not for the piece, it is for me. Last winter you wrote a letter to the chief of cardiology at Lincoln Memorial about communication practices for pediatric deaf patients in the inpatient wing. Among the recommendations was a daily attending-level sign language rounding protocol. Was that adopted? A pause. Tabled, Sloane said. Reason given. Budget. Reason, actually. Above my pay grade. Marisol almost smiled. She did not quite. She tapped her own knee with the cap of the pen. Off the record, Doctor. Where is that letter now? In the chief's file. Has anyone outside the cardiology service seen it? Not to my knowledge. Marisol nodded, once, slowly, and then turned her attention back to Daniel, who had stood through all of this with his niece on his shoulder and his free hand at the small of Sloane's back, very lightly, in the place a hand goes when the hand is saying, I am here. Mr. Rourke. Marisol. I will write a piece about the gala. The piece I write will not be a piece about your niece. It will be a piece about an event. There will be one line in it about you. The line will say that you carried a tired 9-year-old out the back at 10:46 and were polite to a columnist on your way through. That is the line. The rest of the piece will go where it goes. Thank you. I am not doing you a favor. I am doing my job. I keep the piece honest. You go home. Sloane lifted Lily's clutch a half-inch in acknowledgement, the small motion she would have made if Lily were awake to receive it, and turned. Daniel followed. Behind them, Marisol picked her notebook up off the side table, opened it to a fresh page, and wrote, The piece is not the piece I was going to write. Henry was at the door of the sedan in the loading bay. He had a folded child's blanket over his forearm, and he held the rear passenger door open, without speaking, and registered, also without speaking, that the man getting in was different from the man who had gotten out at 6 o'clock. Daniel set Lily into the rear seat. Sloane handed the clutch to Henry, who placed it gently on the floor mat. Daniel turned, with one hand still on the inside frame of the open door. Dr. Marchetti. Daniel. Would you... There is a science museum exhibit opening Tuesday. Lily has been talking about it for a month. Mrs. Pham has the tickets. The exhibit is a small one on meteorites. He paused. I am asking if you would join us. Sloane looked at him for a steady beat. All right, she said. Daniel inclined his head, briefly. Henry closed the door. The sedan pulled forward. Sloane watched the brake lights ease around the corner of the loading bay and disappear. The rain was thinner now, almost a mist. She pulled the navy dress up an inch off the ground at the back, so it would not drag through the small puddles by the service door, and she walked to the side street where a cab was waiting for her, the one her chief of staff had prearranged, and she went home. It was 11:08 when she got into the cab. It was 11:52 in her studio apartment in Lakeview with her shoes still on, when her phone lit up with a forwarded link and a message from her colleague, Adeze, that said, Soaping you not on call. But is this you in this photo? Sloane did not, for a moment, click the link. She set the phone face down on her countertop. She poured a glass of water. She drank it. She picked up the phone. The photograph was on the front of the Loomis Hotel's social media account. It was the photograph the photographer had taken at table 7 during the cocktail hour, the one she had been a deliberately blurred shoulder at the edge of in the wide shot. He had, after the cocktail hour, taken a second, closer shot of her crouched beside Lily's chair, her hands lifted in a sign Sloane recognized as meteor, with Lily looking up at her in plain wonder. The shot was lovely. The caption was not. The caption said, "Tonight at the Gala, the Loomis Hotel was proud to host the Lincoln Memorial Children's Hospital Foundation, a special moment between our host family and the hospital's on-call sign liaison, proving that the smallest acts of inclusion light the largest rooms." Sloane stared at the caption. She closed the link. She sat down on the edge of her bed in her navy dress and her one scuffed heel shoe, and she said aloud to her empty studio, "All right." In a penthouse on East Lakeshore Drive, Daniel Rourke was looking at the same photograph on his phone, forwarded by Andrew at 12:03. Subject line, "For your awareness before tomorrow." He read the caption twice. He set the phone on the dressing table, stood in his shirt sleeves for 1 full minute, looking at the mirror without quite seeing himself, then picked it up and dialed Andrew. "Andrew. Mr. Rourke. Did you authorize that caption?" A pause. The caption was drafted by Vivian's communications office. It was published under the hotel's account, which Vivian's foundation handled social on. It is outside our chain. It was published at 11:49. It refers to Dr. Marchetti as the hospital's on-call sign liaison. It does. She is not a sign liaison. She is not. Did Vivian brief her on the caption before it went up? I do not know, sir. The communications office. Find out tonight. Tonight. And, Andrew. Go on. Marisol's research assistant asked us about the cardiology letter. She did. You will not, in any conversation with the communications office of the Foundation, mention that letter. You will not mention it to Vivian. You will not mention it to anyone other than me. Is that understood? Understood. Sleep, Andrew. The call ended. Daniel stood at the dressing table for another long minute. Then he picked up the phone a second time and opened the messaging window with Dr. Marchetti. He had her number. She had texted Henry her cab company's information so he could pass it back to Daniel as a record of the evening, the way responsible adults exchange information when one of them has helped the other's child. The window was empty. He typed. He typed, "Doctor. The caption was not authorized by me. I'm taking steps to have it corrected. I am sorry." He looked at the sentence. He erased it. He typed, "Doctor. I am still learning. I will speak with you tomorrow." He looked at the sentence. He erased it. He set the phone face down on the dressing table. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while. He thought about his sister. He thought about the gold cufflink on his left wrist. He thought, briefly, of the line in his own Marriage of Convenience future that he had been writing in his head for 2.5 years, in which the line said, "Lily's guardian," and never said, "Lily's father." He had written that line so many times that the line had become a wall. He had, tonight, in a green lamp library on a mezzanine in the rain, with a stranger at the window pretending to look at Michigan Avenue, set his hand on the top of his niece's head and kept it there. He had not, for 1 full minute, pressed his thumb against his cufflink. He stood. He turned on the small reading lamp at the bedside. He picked up the phone a third time. He typed. He typed, "Doctor. I have just seen the caption. Please give me until tomorrow to make this right. Whatever they have called you, you were the one chair tonight." He did not send it. He stared at the line, "You were the one chair tonight," for a moment longer than was sensible. Then he held his thumb on the screen, and the small blue arrow took it, and the message went. It was 12:21. In her studio in Lakeview, Sloane was already asleep, phone on the counter face down. She did not see the message until 6:15 the next morning, when the clinic shift alarm went off, and she lifted the phone on her way to the kettle. She read it standing in her socks. She did not, for a moment, reply. She thought about the phrase, "the one chair." She thought about a Tuesday museum exhibit on meteorites. She thought about the hotel's social account caption, about the word liaison, written by someone who had decided to make her smaller in print than she had been in the room. She thought about her own chief of cardiology, who had told her, last winter, that the daily attending level sign rounding protocol was a good letter, and that the wing did not yet have a budget line for it. The polite way of saying, not yet. She thought about the woman in champagne silk, with the brooch at her collarbone, the fixed quality of that smile, and the moment in which the smile had flickered. She set the kettle to boil. She typed back, "Thank you. I have my clinic until 2. I am free after." She sent it. She got dressed. The gala continued, for the city's morning, in the way galas do, as a small social transaction the city had agreed had happened. The Sunday morning preview ran short clips of the senator and of Vivian presenting the auction totals. The hotel's photograph of Table 7 was, by 8, in front of 300,000 people, with its caption intact. Marisol's draft was in her editor's inbox by 9, with the note 1 paragraph short, sending the close tonight. Andrew was at his Wacker Drive desk by 9:15, Foundation Comms head on the line, a list of corrections in front of him. At 9:42, the Foundation's communications head, who had been awake for 19 straight hours, told Andrew that the caption stood. At 9:43, Andrew called Vivian directly. Vivian answered on the 3rd ring. She was in her car. She was, in fact, on her way to a small private breakfast with 2 members of the hospital's board. She said, "Andrew, good morning. I assume this is about the caption." "It is." "Truthfully," she said, "the caption is doing what it is meant to do. The hospital is being celebrated. The wing is being celebrated. Dr. Marchetti is being celebrated. I do not see the difficulty." "The difficulty," Andrew said carefully, "is that Dr. Marchetti is not a sign liaison. She is a pediatric cardiologist. The caption misrepresents her professional role. Mr. Rourke would like it corrected." A short laugh. "Andrew." "Vivian." "You will tell Daniel," she said, in the same warm, bright voice she had used at the head table, "that the caption is the caption, and that the gala is over, and that an exhausted hospital board has had 4 pieces of good news in 12 hours, but we are not going to take away from them this morning. We will look at amending the caption next week, when the dust has settled. The board breakfast is starting. Give Daniel my regards." She hung up. Andrew, in his office on Wacker Drive, set the phone down on his desk and did not, for a long beat, move. He picked the phone up. He called Daniel. Daniel did not, when he heard the report, say anything for 14 seconds. He stood at the window of his office on the 42nd floor and looked out at the lake. The cufflink on his left wrist was undisturbed. His thumb was at his side. "Andrew." "Mr. Rourke." "Cancel my noon meetings." "Done." "And Andrew." "Listening." "Send word to legal. The grant review committee that Dr. Marchetti sits on for our pediatric cardiology naming gift. I want her seat formally protected. In writing, today, before noon." "Before noon." "And, Andrew." "Go on." "Find me Mrs. Pham." The call ended. In the green lamp lobby of Lincoln Memorial Children's Hospital, on a folded chair near the volunteer desk, a 9-year-old girl in a wool coat over her school uniform was waiting for her uncle's driver to take her the 8 blocks to school. She had a paper folded in her coat pocket on which she had written, "I am deaf. I read your mouth a little. I sign." She had not, this morning, had to give it to anyone. The woman at the volunteer desk, who had known Lily since she was 7, had waved her through without speaking, and was now signing across the desk a small private joke about the muffin selection in the lobby cafe. Lily, in the wool coat, was thinking about a chair. She was thinking about her uncle's empty plate at the table the night before, and about the moment, between the chef's honouring and the auction, when the gala chair had stood behind the chair without a place card and asked the woman in the navy dress to leave it. Lily had watched the woman in the navy dress rise, evenly, no flourish, napkin on the seat, and stand to face the gala chair across the table line, and speak in a voice low enough that the nearby tables had to lean in to hear. She had spoken about 3 of her patients, a 6-year-old boy in remission, an 8-year-old girl who had been on the heart transplant list and was now, the prior Tuesday, off it, a 4-year-old, Death, whose family had asked whether the wing had a doctor who could sign, and the wing had said no, but the cardiology service had said, "We will find one." Lily had watched the 4 nearest tables go quiet. People who had not, all evening, listened to her, listening. The gala chair, in the middle of it, set her free hand back at her side very carefully and did not lift it again. Her uncle Daniel did not look once at the gala chair. He had looked, the whole way through, at her, with his thumb resting still on the curve of the tabletop and not at his cufflink at all. Now, in the lobby, Lily lifted her hands from the pockets of her coat and signed, to the volunteer at the desk, the question she had been holding all morning. "Is the doctor in the navy dress at the hospital today?" The volunteer looked up. She did not ask which doctor. She signed back, "Clinic, 8:30 to 2, outpatient, 3rd floor." Lily nodded. She did not ask to go up. She had her uncle's driver to wait for, and her school day to get through, and a folded paper in her pocket, and a meteorite the size of a fingernail in her school bag. She had also, since the night before, a private decision she had not yet told anyone about. The decision was that the woman in the navy dress would be her uncle's friend, and her own friend, and that the room which had ignored her at the gala had not, after all, been a room she lived in. Henry's sedan pulled up at the entrance. The volunteer at the desk lifted one hand in goodbye. Lily walked out. It was, by then, 10:05. In a small private breakfast room on Lake Street, 3 blocks from the river, Vivian Ashworth Pell was lifting a coffee cup to her mouth and saying, brightly, to the board chair across from her, "Truthfully, the wing is going to be a triumph." And a phone in her clutch, set to silent, was lighting up with a message from her 16-year-old daughter Margot that said, in lowercase and without punctuation, "Mum, I saw the caption from last night. You can do better than that." Sunday in Chicago, in October, had the soft grey of a city that had decided to be tender. The wind off the lake was light. The trees along Lakeshore Drive were halfway through their slow gold turn, and the sidewalks along the running path were almost empty at 3 in the afternoon, when Daniel got out of Henry's sedan at the small turnaround near North Avenue Beach, told Henry to wait, and walked the long curve down to the breakwater, where a woman in a grey coat was sitting on the concrete steps with a paper cup of coffee in her hands. She had texted him at 2:11 from her clinic. She had said, "I am out. Lakefront, if you like, near North Avenue. I will be on the steps." He had not, before this, walked along the lakefront in 9 months. He had bought his last cup of coffee from a paper cup 3 years before. He had also, in the back seat of the car on the way over, taken off the gold cufflink at his left wrist and placed it carefully in the small dish beside his keys, because he had decided that he was not, today, going to be a man who pressed his thumb against it. Sloane saw him coming. She did not stand. She lifted the paper cup an inch in greeting and slid 2 inches over on the step. He sat. For a while neither of them spoke. The lake was the color of slate. 2 sailboats were practicing their tacking out near the white pier light. A man and a boy were flying a small kite that was not really flying. The boy was laughing. "I owe you a sentence," Daniel said finally. "You sent a sentence. I owe you a better one." Sloane wrapped both hands around the paper cup. "I read your sentence at 6:15 this morning while I was waiting for the kettle. The sentence said I was the one chair last night. You were. That is a sentence I will keep." He looked out at the lake. "The caption is being corrected. Andrew is..." taking longer than I would like. The Foundation's communications office reports up through Vivian directly, and Vivian has decided, for the moment, the caption stays. I'm taking it to her in writing tomorrow morning. If the caption is not corrected by Tuesday noon, I will pull the Rourke Holdings pledge and redirect it to the existing pediatric program. I will also resign my Foundation board seat. I am telling you so you know what is in motion, not so you will thank me. She turned her head and looked at him. All right, she said. There is something else. Marisol Espinosa is sitting on a piece. The piece is not about your letter. The piece is about the Gala. I do not yet know what shape the piece will take. I will know by Sunday evening. If your name appears in the piece in a way that you do not want, I will make a call to the editor. I will not, however, make a call on your behalf without your sign-off. I would prefer to make the call. I am asking your permission. You can call. All right. A small silence. The cardiology letter, Sloane said. Andrew knows about it. Andrew told me last night. He is not going to use it. All right. Doctor, Daniel. My sister wrote that letter too. 8 years ago. Same wing. Different protocol. She wrote it as a parent, not a doctor. The chief at the time tabled hers too. The reason was budget. Actually, that one senior attending did not want to learn signs at 54. My sister put the letter in a drawer and went on. I read it last winter, after I read yours. They were the same letter. It is the reason I co-signed the naming gift, not philanthropy. The wing was not going to be built without it, and the gift was the only way to put my sister's name on a hallway that would have a sign rounding protocol, whether the chief wanted one or not. Sloane held the paper cup very still. Kara Rourke, she said. You knew her. I read her letter, last winter. The chief left it on the conference room table after a meeting. I asked permission to read it. He said it was a closed file. I asked again. He let me read it, standing in the doorway of his office. It is a very good letter. Yes. He did not, this time, hear the word. I should have told you last night, he said, about my sister, and about the gift, and about the letter. I did not, because I have spent 2.5 years not telling anyone about her, in any sentence that did not have an operational shape. I am telling you now. The sailboats out by the pier light came around, slowly, into the wind. Sloane said, Thank you. That was the third sign. The third, last night. Lily said the third sign was a circle, and she did not, in fact, give a third word. She did not need to. The third sign was the one your hands made when you reached across the table and put the water glass at her elbow without announcing it. She told me, in the car on the way home, that one is mine. She said it about you. She meant it about the gesture. Sloane looked for one moment away. She turned back. Daniel. Sloane. You should know one thing about me. I am not, as a rule, a person who is good at the second day. I am very good at the first day. I am very good at the 11th hour at the bedside of a difficult heart. I am less good at what happens at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday in October, when a man in a navy overcoat sits down on a step and tells me about his sister. I have, in the past, mishandled that hour. I am telling you so that, if I mishandle it again, you will not read me wrong. I will not read you wrong. You may. I would prefer that you ask me, before you read me, what I meant. All right? All right. The boy and the kite had given up on the kite and were eating something out of a paper bag. The sailboats had crossed each other. The wind shifted 1/2 degree. Daniel said, There is a museum exhibit on meteorites that opens Tuesday. Lily told me about it last night, twice. She has been talking about it for a month. The first ticket she ever asked me for, when she came to live with me, was for a meteorite show at the planetarium. The show closed before we could go. She has not, since, asked me for another ticket. She asked me for these Tuesday tickets in August. Mrs. Pham bought them in August because she did not trust me to remember to buy them. They are on the kitchen counter under a jar. Tuesday, 5 o'clock, last entrance. All right. Sloane. Daniel. This is a meteor question. She almost laughed with her shoulders, the way she had laughed silently last night. Go on. Will you come? To the meteorite show. To the meteorite show. With Lily and me, and possibly Mrs. Pham, who has appointed herself a chaperone with the energy of a woman who has been waiting 2.5 years to be one. We will look at meteorites. We will eat the small, dry sandwiches the museum serves. Lily will explain the difference between iron meteorites and stony meteorites with the precision of a colleague at a department conference. I will be allowed to ask 3 questions. You will be allowed to ask as many as you like. 3 is a small budget for you. 3 is what I have earned. He waited. She said, All right, I will come. Daniel did not, in that moment, do anything in particular. He let his right hand rest on his knee. He let his left wrist, without the cufflink, sit easy on the step beside him. He did not say thank you. He had said it once last night. He was not a man who repeated a sentence he had meant. He said, Mrs. Pham will be very pleased. Mrs. Pham. Mrs. Pham has had opinions about my evenings for 19 years. She is, this afternoon, watching my niece make a paper meteorite in the kitchen. And she said exactly this sentence to me at the door before I left. Bring the doctor home for Tuesday, or I will be the one who calls her. I am paraphrasing only slightly. Sloane laughed once, quietly, with her shoulders. The wind off the lake came up. She set the empty paper cup on the step between them. After a while, she said, Will you walk with me back? All right. They stood. They walked north along the running path, slowly, in the easy quiet of 2 people who had agreed, briefly, on a Tuesday. Henry's sedan was waiting at the North Avenue turnaround. Daniel did not get in. He walked Sloane another 2 blocks to her cab. He held the door of the cab for her without flourish and closed it after her, and the cab pulled forward, and the lake breeze caught the corner of his unfastened cuff for a moment, and let it go. He watched the cab as far as the next light. He turned, finally, back to the sedan. It was 3:48. In his car, on the 8-block drive home, Daniel allowed himself, for the first time in 2 years and 1 month, to think the word father in a sentence about himself, in the present tense, without immediately reaching for a different word. That was Sunday. Monday, in Chicago in October, was different. The soft grey had hardened. The wind off the lake was no longer light. The first thing Sloane saw, at 6:20, on the cracked screen of her phone in the kitchen counter, was not Daniel's name. It was a forwarded link from a junior colleague named Pranav, with a 1-line message. Don't read the comments. The link was to a column posted at 5:58 that morning on the city's largest concha site. The byline was not Marisol Espinosa's. The headline was, The Quiet Liaison, How One Hospital Staffer Lit Up the City's Brightest Gala. Sloane read the first paragraph standing at the counter in her socks. The piece called her Lincoln Memorial's on-call sign liaison. It said Dr. Marchetti had been discreetly tapped by the Gala's communications team to assist with the host family's needs for the evening, and had risen to the moment with professional grace. It called her quiet competence at the table a fill-in. It quoted a statement, attributed to a source close to Rourke Holdings, that the firm was exploring specialty education options for the host family's young charge. The piece closed with the photograph from the hotel's social account and the original caption underneath. Sloane read the piece twice. She did not, on either reading, click through to the comments. She set the phone face down on the counter. She set the kettle to boil. She thought, I am going to my clinic shift. She thought, I will read this again at lunch. She thought, I will not read the comments. The kettle, when it boiled, was louder than she remembered it being. At 7:05, in the back seat of his car on Lakeshore Drive on the way to a board meeting, Daniel Rourke read the same column. He read it once. He did not, for a long beat, do anything in particular. The column had not been written by Marisol. The byline was a junior writer at the same site, whose recent pieces had been hotel openings and second-tier benefits. The framing, Daniel registered it with the cold clarity in which he registered loan covenants, was Vivian's, lifted from her Gala press release. The line about exploring specialty education options for the host family's young charge was a line he had never said. The phrase, "a source close to Rourke Holdings," could not refer to Andrew or to him. By elimination, it was invented or sourced from Vivian's communications office. He read the piece a second time. He set the phone face down on the seat beside him. He looked out the window at the lake. He thought, Vivian placed this piece in retaliation for what I told Andrew about pulling the pledge. He thought, Vivian placed this piece using my niece's situation as the lever. He thought, then, the sentence that, he would understand only later, was the wrong sentence, was the sentence the column had been crafted to plant in him. He thought, Dr. Marchetti spoke to Marisol last night about the cardiology letter. Marisol's research assistant has handed the framing to the junior writer. The piece was placed, but it was placed with material the doctor herself supplied. The doctor may have consented to the framing in exchange for a public defense of her letter. The doctor may have decided, in the small hours of Sunday morning, that the visibility was useful. He sat with that sentence for a long beat. He could not, immediately, prove it was wrong. He could not, immediately, prove it was right. The car was passing Oak Street. The flag at the foot of the Drake was at half-mast. He did not know why. He picked up the phone, eventually, and dialed not Sloane, but his lawyer. Bill? Daniel. There is a column out this morning. I am reading it. There is a grant review committee on the pediatric cardiology naming gift. Dr. Sloane Marchetti, Lincoln Memorial, sits on the committee. I want her seat held, but I want her access to the proposal materials paused for 48 hours. A short silence. Daniel. 48 hours. On what basis? Pending clarification of a public communication issue. Daniel. 48 hours. Send a polite, lawyer-toned email. Use the language, paused pending clarification. Send it at 8:30. And if she asks me what the issue is, tell her I will explain personally. When? By Wednesday morning. A longer silence. Daniel, Bill said, I will do this because you have asked, and because in 19 years of work for you, you have asked me to do almost nothing reckless. I will send the email at 8:30 in the language you want. But hold one sentence for a few hours. If you have read the column the way I think you have, and if the doctor is who I think you described to me at lunch last August, then in 48 hours, you will be calling me to retract the first email with the second one. I would prefer to send only the first. I am willing to send both. I am asking you to wait until 11 before you confirm. Daniel looked at the lake. 8:30, he said. All right. The call ended. The car turned onto Wacker. At 8:34, in the third-floor outpatient clinic on Lincoln Memorial's pediatric cardiology wing, Sloane Marchetti, who had not been into the comments and had not, after her second reading, looked at the photograph again, set her phone on the small charging dock at the back of her clinic room desk and walked into the exam room. Matteo's mother, in the small green plastic chair by the wall, looked up. Doctor, are you all right this morning? Sloane said, I am all right. How is he? He slept the whole night. He did not wake at 2. Good, Sloane said. That is very good. Her first patient of the day was 4 years old and named Matteo. He had a hole the size of a fingernail in the wall between 2 chambers of his heart, but was not going to need surgery until he was 12. She signed "Good morning, my friend" to him and to his mother before she sat down, and she did her job, the way she had done her job on every day for 9 years that the world had decided to be a more difficult world than it had been the day before. At 9:10, she stepped out to use the bathroom and to drink a glass of water. At 9:11, she checked her phone. There was an email from a law firm she did not recognize, sent at 8:31. The email was 3 paragraphs long. It used the phrase, paused pending clarification of a public communication issue twice. It informed her, with elaborate politeness, that her access to the proposal materials for the Pediatric Cardiology Naming Gift Review Committee was suspended for 48 hours. The email was copied to her chief of cardiology. The email was copied to the hospital's compliance office. It did not name Daniel Rourke. It did not need to. Sloane stood at the back of the clinic corridor, with the phone in her hand and the small, thin metal taste of fluorescent light in her mouth, and she read the email twice. She did not, this time, set the phone face down. She thought, he saw the column. He has decided that I placed it. He has decided that I used Lily for the visibility. He has. This is what he has done. She thought, I read him wrong. She thought, I was warned about Sunday afternoons. I told him on Sunday afternoon that I was not good at the second day. He told me on Sunday afternoon that I was the one chair last night. Both of those sentences were true. They are still true. They are also, both of them, the kind of sentence that is worth the breath it takes to say it, and is not, by itself, a guarantee of the third day. She thought, he has, on the third day, sent me an email through a lawyer. She thought, I will not, at this moment, do anything I will regret. She slid the phone into the pocket of her white coat. She walked back to the exam room. She finished the morning. At 10:40, in the corridor, the senior fellow stopped her by the supply cabinet. Sloane, did you see the email from the firm? I saw it. Do you want me to call compliance for you? Not yet, Sloane said. I am going to see the 11 o'clock first. She did not look at the email a second time. She did not text Daniel. She did not click through to the comments. She drank the glass of water. She went on. At 11:04, in his office on the 42nd floor of the building on Wacker Drive, Daniel Rourke received a single text from his housekeeper, Mrs. Fam, that said Mr. Rourke. Iris here. Lily is asking when the doctor is coming on Tuesday. I have told her Tuesday 5 o'clock. I would like to confirm with you that Tuesday 5 o'clock is still Tuesday 5 o'clock. He sat with the phone in his hand for a long beat. He did not immediately answer. He turned instead to the window. The lake was the color of slate. He thought, maybe the doctor really did consent to the framing in the small hours of Sunday morning. Maybe she really did want the visibility. Maybe she really did, in some part of herself, use the child to get there. Maybe what I felt on the breakwater on Sunday afternoon was a hand on a glass that has been arranged so I would reach for it. Maybe I am, this morning, the man who has finally read the room correctly. He sat with that sentence for a long beat. He could not, just now, prove it was wrong. The phone in his hand stayed face up. He did not, for 2 more hours, answer Mrs. Pham. Across town, in the 7th floor offices of the Gala committee, Vivian Ashworth Pell sat alone at her desk, with the door to her private office closed and the blinds half drawn. Her assistant was at the lobby for coffee. The 2 interns had gone to lunch. The phone on her desk was face up. The screen showed the text, in lowercase, that her daughter Margot had sent her on Saturday night. Mom, I saw the caption from last night. You can do better than that. Vivian sat with her hands flat on the desk on either side of the phone and looked at the text for a long beat. She did not pick the phone up. She did not type. She did not, this time, turn the phone face down. She did not call her daughter. She did not call the junior writer at the column, whose byline had run at 5:58 that morning. She did not call the editor she had emailed at 12:40 Sunday night with the words, I would like to suggest a framing. She did not call anyone at all. She looked down, instead, at her own hands. The wedding band, the small, thin gold band she had not taken off in 22 years, was loose on her ring finger and had turned, sometime during the morning, half a turn, so the worn, smooth side was out now, and the small, old engraving was on the inside. She did not immediately turn it back. She breathed twice, very carefully, and her shoulders, which had been held high under the cream wool of her jacket all morning, came down a quarter inch, in a way that nobody was in the room to see. Then her assistant came back with the coffee. By the time the cup was set on the corner of the desk, Vivian's phone was face down again, and her shoulders were back up. "Did the florist confirm the Tuesday delivery for the spring luncheon?" she asked, in a clear, bright voice. "They confirmed at 9, the assistant said. 2 arrangements at the entry, 1 at each table." "Good, thank you." The assistant did not notice anything was different. That was, by a very small margin, accurate. At 11:41, in the kitchen of the house on Astor Street, Mrs. Pham, slicing pears for Lily's after-school plate, set the small paring blade down and read the column on her phone twice. She thought, "I saw the laptop screen on Saturday night. The framing has now come out under a junior writer's byline. It is the same framing. It is wrong. Mr. Rourke has not, in 2 hours, answered me about Tuesday. He does not, as a rule, take 2 hours." She covered the pears, wrote a note for the afternoon nanny, put her coat on, and got into a cab to the building on Wacker Drive. She had been working for Daniel Rourke for 4 years. She had seen, in those 4 years, exactly 2 things that mattered. The way he had stood in the doorway of Lily's first hospital room 9 months ago, with his hand on the frame, the way a man stands when he is keeping himself from falling, and the way, on Saturday night, he had walked across the ballroom and pulled out a chair next to a child nobody else had pulled out a chair for, in front of 900 people. She paid the cab in cash. She rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. The assistant at the front desk said, mildly, that Mr. Rourke was in a meeting. Mrs. Pham said, "He will see me." The assistant blinked. Mrs. Pham went past the desk. She knocked once, with 2 knuckles, and went in without waiting. Daniel was at the window. The phone was on the desk, face up. He had not, since 11:04, picked it up. He turned when she came in. His face did the brief recalibration of a man deep in an argument with himself who is being interrupted by a second person. Mrs. Pham did not sit down. She said, "Mr. Rourke." He said, "Mrs. Pham, Lily is—" She said, "Lily is at school. Lily is fine. I have come about the column." Daniel went very still. "Mrs." Pham said, "On Saturday night at the Gala, 7 minutes past 9. I was at the back of the ballroom by the program screens. Mrs. Ashworth Pell was at a small table behind that wall with a laptop, typing. I saw the screen because I was carrying a tray past her and stopped because one glass was unsteady. I did not mean to read it. I read it anyway. The sentence used quiet liaison. It used exploring specialty education. It used Rourke. That sentence is the one that ran this morning under a junior writer's byline. I am telling you because for 2 hours your phone has been face up on a desk and Lily has been asking about Tuesday." She said, "I have been asking myself since Saturday night whether it was my place to tell you. It is not. I am telling you anyway." She did not, at that moment, look away. Daniel sat down the way a man sits down when he has been standing on a leg he had not noticed was numb. He said, very quietly, "On the screen." Mrs. Pham said, "On her screen, at 7 minutes past 9, at a table behind the wall where the screens are for the program." Daniel said, "Mrs. Pham." Mrs. Pham said, "Tuesday 5 o'clock is still Tuesday 5 o'clock, Mr. Rourke. I will tell Lily." She turned around and went out, closing the door behind her with the same 2-knuckle quiet she had used coming in. In the hall, the assistant at the front desk asked her if she would like a coffee. Mrs. Pham said, mildly, that she would not. She went home and finished the pears. In the office on the 42nd floor, the phone was still face up on the desk. Daniel sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands open in front of him, looked at his own palms for a long beat, then picked up the phone and did not, this time, call the lawyer. He called the school. He asked one question. The answer was the answer he had been afraid of, and had not, until this morning, been willing to ask. He hung up. He stood up. He walked the length of his own office and stopped at the credenza by the window, with both hands flat on it. He thought, Lily sat next to me in the cab on Saturday night and looked out the window at the lake the whole way home and did not speak. I told myself she was tired. I have not, since the gala, asked her a single question that does not begin with, "Would you like?" He went to the elevator. He went home. It was 12:38 in the afternoon on a Monday. Lily was not yet home from school. He sat at the kitchen island with a glass of water, and he waited. At 3:11, the back door opened. Lily came in with her backpack on one shoulder and her coat half off. She stopped when she saw him. She put the backpack down, took the coat off, and looked at him for a long beat. Daniel said, and he signed it, slowly, because Sunday afternoon on the breakwater had been 40 hours ago, and his hands had not forgotten. Lily. "Can I ask you a question?" Lily said with her hands, "Yes." Daniel said, "On Saturday night, at the gala, before the doctor sat down at our table, was there an adult who looked at you before the doctor?" Lily's eyes did the small thing that the eyes of a 9-year-old will do when an adult has finally asked the right question. She said with her hands, "No. The doctor was the first one." She crouched. She asked me to correct her. Nobody had ever asked me to correct them. She said with her hands, "Are you all right?" Daniel, and this was the moment, and he knew it, and he did not look away, said with his hands, "No, but I will be. Thank you for telling me." He pulled her in for a hug. Lily put her face against his shoulder for a beat, then stepped back and said with her hands, "Is the doctor still coming on Tuesday?" Daniel signed back, "I'm going to ask her tonight." Lily signed, "Ask her well." Daniel signed, "I will." Lily picked up her backpack and took it upstairs. She did not, on the way up, look back to check whether he was watching her go. Daniel sat at the kitchen island for a long beat. Then he got up. He did, in the next 90 minutes, the following 4 things. He wrote a 1-line email resigning from the board of the Children's Hospital, with the Chief of Medical Staff copied. He pressed send. He wrote a second email to the Gala committee, naming Vivian Ashworth Pell in the first line, withdrawing Rourke Holdings' multi-year pledge announced Saturday night. Unconditional, immediate. The same amount redirected to the existing pediatric program at the hospital in the name of Cara Rourke, to be administered by the program's clinical leadership. Do not contact the doctor about it. He pressed send. He called Bill, his lawyer. He said, "Bill, the email I asked you to send this morning about the grant review access, reverse it. Today, before 5. Send the doctor a second email through you that says the first was sent in error, that the error was mine, that the access has been restored. Sign it from me, not the firm. Do not soften the word error." Bill said, "All right." Daniel hung up. He called Mrs. Pham. He said, "Thank you. Tuesday, 5 o'clock is still Tuesday, 5 o'clock. I will be home at 6. Mrs. Pham said, mildly, that she had bought a second jar of the butter cookies on the way home and put them in the cupboard on the left. He looked out the kitchen window at the small November rain that had started over the lake. He put his coat on. He went out. The doctor's apartment was in a third-floor walk-up in Lakeview, a brick building from the 1920s, with a green-painted street door and a brass mailbox panel in the vestibule. Daniel had never been there. He had the address because she had given it to him on Sunday afternoon on the breakwater, in case, she had said, anyone needed to reach her on a weekend the hospital did not. He rang the bell at 6:22. She came down. She did not look surprised. She had, by her face, already had the thought he might come, and not yet decided what she would do if he did. She did not open the door wider than one shoulder. The rain was small and steady on the slate steps behind him. He had no umbrella. The shoulders of his coat were dark with it. He said, "Dr. Marchetti." She said, "Mr. Rourke." He said, I am not asking to come in. I am asking for 4 minutes. She did not move. He said, I sent you, this morning, an email through a lawyer. The email was an error. The error was mine. Bill has, in the last hour, sent you a second email reversing the first. The second email is, technically, also through a lawyer, which I am aware is not the way one corrects this kind of error. I am telling you in person because the second email is not enough. She said, Go on. He said, I read the column at 6. By 7, I had decided the framing was a framing you had agreed to. By 7:30, I had called Bill. By 8, the email was sent. I did, between 6 and 7:30, the thing that I told myself 8 years ago, after I lost my sister, I would never again do to a woman who had earned not having it done to her. I assumed she had used the child. I assumed it because the alternative, that someone in the room on Saturday night had arranged this without her consent, was a sentence I did not, at 6 in the morning, want to be the one to carry. He said, Mrs. Pham came to my office at 11:41. She told me what she saw on Saturday night, at 7 minutes past 9. I went home. I asked Lily who looked at her first, before you sat down at our table. Lily told me. I have no doubt now about who arranged the framing, or who did not. He said, In the last 90 minutes, I have resigned from the hospital board, withdrawn the Gala pledge and redirected it to the pediatric program in my sister's name, and asked Bill to reverse the email in writing before 5. None of those is contingent on this doorway. He said, I am here because I owed it to you to say in your own hallway that I read you wrong, in the exact way you warned me on Sunday afternoon that I would. I am not asking you what Wednesday will be. I had to put one foot, before the end of the third day, on the bottom step. He stopped. She looked at him for a long beat. The rain on the slate behind him went on. She did not, for a beat, say anything. Then she said, Mr. Rock. He said, Doctor. She said, Come up. She did not say it warmly. She said it in the same flat tone she used in the cardiology corridor, when a parent had earned the right to sit in her office for 10 minutes, even though she did not yet know what they would decide together after the 10 minutes. He came up. She did not take his hand on the stairs. In the small, clean kitchen at the top, she put the kettle on, not for him, but because she had been about to put it on for herself. She set 2 cups out. She did not forgive him at the kitchen table. She did not agree to Tuesday, 5 o'clock. She said, I am not, tonight, telling you what Tuesday is. I am telling you that you have, by coming up these stairs in the wet coat, bought yourself the right to ask me again on Tuesday morning at 8, through Mrs. Pham, whether Lily would like the doctor to come at 5. You will let the question be about the child. If the answer is yes, the doctor will come, and on Tuesday, she will speak to you only about Lily. On Wednesday, the doctor will decide whether she is ready to speak to you about anything that is not the child. Is that the agreement? He said, That is the agreement. She said, All right. She did not, at the door, take the wet coat off his shoulders. He went back down the stairs. In the vestibule, with his hand on the brass handle of the street door, he stopped, and turned, and looked up the stairwell, and saw, on the third-floor landing, the small, bright shape of her in the doorway, with her hand on the frame the way a person stands when she is keeping herself from coming any farther down. He went out. The rain on the sidewalk had not stopped. On Tuesday morning at 8:04, in the small, windowless conference room 2 doors down from Vivian's office on the 7th floor, Dr. Sloane Marchetti, in a charcoal coat and her hospital lanyard turned so the badge faced her chest, sat across a polished walnut table from Vivian Ashworth Pell, who was in cream wool and a thin pearl strand, and the wedding band, this morning, turned back the right way. Sloane had asked, at 6 the night before, through Vivian's assistant, for 10 minutes. Vivian had granted 12, in writing, with the courtesy line about the cardiology fellow's lovely work in pediatrics. Sloane sat with her hands flat on the table in front of her. She said, Mrs. Ashworth Pell, I am here for one sentence. Vivian said smoothly, Doctor, I do think there has been a misunderstanding about the caption. Sloane said, I am not here about the caption. I am here about the framing in this morning's column. It was on your laptop at 9:07 on Saturday night. It was sent from your laptop at 12:40 Sunday night to the editor. The byline went on the junior writer because the framing needed a byline that was not yours. I am not asking you to confirm any of that. I know it. Mr. Rourke knows it. I wanted you to know, before I said the next sentence, that I am not saying it on the basis of a guess. Vivian said, Doctor. Sloane said, Your daughter texts you in lower case. There was a beat. Vivian did not move. Sloane said, Children who grow up being asked to perform write in lower case to their mothers when they are tired of performing. They do not, in the lowercase texts, ask their mothers to do anything. They ask their mothers to read the tone. The lowercase is the part the mother is not allowed to correct. She said, On Saturday night, in front of 900 people, you called the child Mr. Rourke had pulled out a chair for the niece. In the corridor at 7-Eleven, you told me I had wandered into a room I did not belong in. In a column at 5:58 Monday morning, you wrote a sentence under another writer's name that called me a quiet liaison. You are very, very good at writing the lowercase out of a room. You are so good at it that your own daughter is, at 16, still writing it to you in private. She said, I am not Mrs. Ashworth Pell, asking you to apologize to me. The room you have spent 16 years arranging is a room that costs your daughter a sentence every Saturday night. The cost is not, this morning, mine. The cost is hers. She said, That was the sentence. Thank you for the 12 minutes. She stood up, buttoned her coat, and put her hand on the door. Vivian said, very quietly, Doctor. Sloane stopped, with her hand on the door. Then she said, in a voice that did not, this time, carry to the next room, Please leave. Sloane said, Yes, ma'am. She went. 2 Wednesdays later, on a clear, cold November night, at 7:23, the doorbell at the house on Astor Street rang. Mrs. Pham, who had been told that morning there would be a guest at 7:30, opened the door. Vivian Ashworth Pell, in a navy coat and the thin pearl strand, was on the step. She was holding, in her gloved left hand, a hardcover book wrapped in brown paper. She was holding, in her gloved right hand, a small cream-colored envelope. She said, Mrs. Pham, I have a appointment with Mr. Rourke at 7:30. Mrs. Pham said, mildly, Please, come in. She did not take Vivian's coat. Vivian did not, this evening, expect her to. In the front parlour, with the small green glass lamp on, Daniel was standing by the marble mantel. He had, on Sloane's request, asked Vivian for 15 minutes, in writing, through Mrs. Pham, and told her in the same letter that the doctor would not be present, and that this was the doctor's preference, and not his. Vivian came in. She put the book on the small round table by the window. She put the envelope next to it. She did not, this evening, sit down before Daniel did. He sat. She sat on the green velvet sofa across from him, with her gloves in her lap, and her wedding band, this evening, very still. She said, in a clear voice that did not, this evening, carry the high, bright tone of the Gala, Mr. Rourke, I have come to say 4 sentences. I have rehearsed them. I would be obliged if you would let me say them through. Daniel said, Go on. Vivian said, First, I wrote the framing in the column. I sent it to the editor at 12:40 on Sunday night. I asked in the sending email that the byline not be mine. I am not, this evening, claiming I did not. She said, Second, the framing was wrong. The doctor is the cardiology fellow who looked at the child. I knew this on Saturday night at 7:09, because I have, since 2009, attended every meeting of the pediatric subcommittee at the hospital. I wrote the framing anyway. I am not, this evening, claiming I did it by mistake. She said, "Third, I am not going to ask you for forgiveness this evening. I am told by people I trust that an apology that opens with a request for forgiveness is a request for absolution, and that the cost in the room belongs to the person being apologized to. I have, in the last 2 weeks, taught myself to read the word cost in a sentence and not skip over it. I am resigning, effective Friday, as chair of the Gala committee. The seat will go to Mrs. Loomis, who has, for 9 years, deserved it." She said, "Fourth, I brought 2 things. The book on the table, a hardcover ASL grammar. It is for me. I have asked Mrs. Pham to keep it in the drawer of the small round table, so that on the 4 Sundays a year I am invited, I can sit by the window and read 1 page before I go in. The second is the envelope. A personal check to a pediatric audiology non-profit on Pulaski Road that has been operating on the kindness of Dr. Marchetti, who drives across town after her shift to read echocardiograms for them. I have asked the executive director to write me back with the number of children the check will cover." She said, "That was 4. I will go." She stood up. She did not ask whether Lily was at home. She did not, on the way out, ask Mrs. Pham about the spring luncheon. In the hall she paused, with her gloved hand on the brass, and said, without turning around, "Mr. Rourke." Daniel said, from the parlour, "Mrs. Ashworth Pell." Vivian said, "Tonight, when I go home, I will ask my daughter to teach me 1 sentence, in her language." She went out. The door closed behind her. The small, green glass lamp went on burning quietly. The Loomis Ballroom, 3 months after the gala, in late February, looked very different in the daytime. The chandeliers were on, but dimmed. The round tables had been cleared away. In their place, 10 long rectangular tables in white linen ran in 2 rows down the parquet, set with carafes of water and folders bound in dove-grey paper. A simple wooden lectern on a low platform under the velvet curtain faced the room. The annual research grants ceremony of the Cara Rourke Pediatric Cardiology Fund, newly endowed, administered by the program's own clinical leadership, with a small lay advisory board chaired by Mrs. Pham, was on the program for 1:10 in the afternoon. There were 46 people in the room. 11 of them were 9 years old, or close to it, and in the front row. One, in a navy dress with a small green silk band at the collar that her father had let her pick herself, was Lily Rourke. Beside her, on the small folding chair pulled close, because the row was a row of children, and the children in this row sat the way they wanted, with his coat on the back of his chair and his cufflinks plain and unmonogrammed, was Daniel. At the lectern, in a charcoal blazer and a pale ivory blouse, with her hospital lanyard on but turned around so the badge faced her chest, was Sloane Marchetti. She had, 3 weeks ago, been named one of 3 clinical co-leads of the fund. She had taken the role because it let her stay on the hospital floor Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, read echocardiograms on Pulaski Road on Wednesday evenings, and run the grant program on Tuesdays. She had asked at the door this morning where Daniel and Lily would sit, because she wanted to know which row to look at when she reached the 3rd paragraph. She got to the 3rd paragraph at 1:14. It was about the children's program at the hospital, and about 3 patients, and about the way the room they were sitting in this afternoon had been, in November, the room in which someone had pulled out a chair for one child. She did not, in the paragraph, name the child. She named the chair. At 1:15, while she was still on the paragraph, Lily, in the front row, turned a little in her seat and lifted her hand to her shoulder and made, slowly, the 4 signs that, in November, on the breakwater on a Sunday afternoon, her father had begun to learn. She made the sign for this. She made the sign for is. She made the sign for meteor. She made the small hooked question mark at the end of the line. Beside her, Daniel, who had over 3 months of Tuesday evenings with Lily's small straight-backed correction at his elbow, taught himself the alphabet and the basic verbs and the family signs and, last week, the sign for meteor, lifted his own hand to his shoulder and signed back, slowly, with the focused small care of a man who had decided, in November, that he would never again be the man at the head of a table who did not know how to ask a child a question in the child's first language. He made the sign for yes. He made the sign for it. He made the sign for is. Lily turned back to the lectern. At the lectern, Sloane finished the paragraph. She turned, on the page, to the fourth paragraph. She did not look down at the page. She looked instead into the front row. She saw from the lectern the brief flicker of their hands in the dim light of the ballroom, and in the second beat, she saw that the small flicker had already finished, that Lily was looking back up at her, that Daniel was looking back up at her, and that neither of them had needed her to see it. She found her place again on the page. She read the fourth paragraph. It was about the next 10 years of the fund. Outside, the February light was the pale, clean white Chicago gets between two snows. In the front row, the green silk band at Lily's collar moved, once when she breathed. Sloane read on.